Hey guys, wanted to tackle something today that I've noticed unfold over the past week or two, and it starts with the Trump speech at Whirlpool, where he made the strange, I would call it, and obscure comments about enemies that he has. I got a lot of enemies. Okay, so a lot of people were wondering, is he going to go into a bunker after this? Is there been an assassination attempt? Something to that effect? And in all reality, I've been wondering the same thing. Let's at first just listen to what he said.
To this end, a short time ago, I signed a new executive order to ensure that when it comes to essential medicines, we buy American. The executive order will require that U.S. government agencies purchase all essential medicines that we need from American sources. The executive order will also sweep away unnecessary regulatory barriers to domestic pharmaceutical production and support advanced manufacturing processes that will keep our drug prices low and allow American companies to compete on the world stage. We'll be able to compete on the world stage, but we're now going to have the lowest prices as opposed to by far the highest prices. I have people that I know that go to Canada. They go to Canada to buy drugs, to buy prescription drugs. They go there because the price is so much lower than the United States. And yet it's made by the same company, often in the same plant. It's a disgrace. And the politicians allowed this to happen for many, many decades. You have people called middlemen. I don't know who the middlemen are. I don't know. They never say middle women, so they're politically not correct. But I've heard the term middlemen for a long time. They are so wealthy. They are so wealthy. Nobody has any idea who the hell they are, what they do. They make more money than the drug companies. You know, in all fairness, at least the drug companies have to produce a product, and it has to be a good product. But the middlemen, well, the rebate that I'm doing cuts out the middlemen and it reduces costs, and the money goes back to the people purchasing the drugs. So I have a lot of enemies out there. This may be the last time you'll see me for a while. A lot of very, very rich enemies, but they are not happy with what I'm doing. But I figure we have one chance to do it, and no other president's going to do what I do. No other president would do a favored nations, a rebate, a buy from other nations at much less cost. Nobody. And there are a lot of unhappy people, and they're very rich people, and they're very unhappy.
So is he being over the top or serious? He's being, no doubt, 100% serious. The pharma industry, the medical industrial complex, has overtaken the military industrial complex as the number one lobbyist entity in Washington, D.C. And what is this favored nations thing's going to do? Well, currently, in the United States, we pay outrageous prices for our medicines. And there's always been two excuses given to us for this. One, because insurance started covering pharmaceuticals and people stopped paying attention to the price inflation because insurance was just taking care of it for us. And then the next thing you know, we looked at our insurance statements and we realized medicine prices had gotten way out of control. And the other one is, well, all of the medical companies are in America. We have to pay for the research and development, and they make their money back on all the things that they discovered here in America, and then many years later when it's available to the other countries of the world, they get it for cheap. Both of these explanations are, of course, absolute bullshit. We pay more for our pharmaceuticals because of our whole system, the way it's set up to be, we're supposed to. So what is Trump doing? Well, he's saying the American citizen gets the pharmaceutical for the same price that you're selling it to other countries for the cheapest price that you're selling it to other countries for. Let's say, I'm going to take one out of the air. Let's go with Seroquel. So let's say Seroquel costs $5 in the United States, but it only costs $1 in Germany, and it costs $3 in Brazil and $4 in Ecuador. Okay. We get that $3 price from Germany. So what is that going to do to the pharmaceutical company? Well, they're going to want to make sure that their cheapest price they put out there to the other countries is a price that they can afford it being priced at in the United States. So the rest of the countries' prices that are out there right now, significantly cheaper than ours, those prices are going to go up. Our prices are going to kind of come down, and it's going to kind of buoyantly meet in the middle. It's actually a pretty decent plan for this one specific situation. And also, it does make some pretty significant enemies. So that speech was on like the 6th. And then a few days later on the 10th, Trump was rushed off of stage during his press conference, which I'm sure you guys remember. There was a shooting on the outer perimeter of the White House. Now, this didn't seem like an actual attempt on the president. What it felt like to me was they were doing a penetration test, seeing how quickly the Secret Service reacts to certain situations. To me, I'm like, yeah, now this is getting interesting, because the speech and the incident on their own isn't really that head-turning, but combined. And then a couple of days later, a helicopter that left Joint Base Andrews was shot at by small arms fire from the ground. The helicopter was hit, an airman was injured from one bullet while they were 1,000 feet up in the air. They were hovering over what is considered upper middle class neighborhood, and the FBI was immediately dispatched, but there was no information after that. The thing about this is, this helicopter squadron transports VIPs in DC. It's also where Air Force One and Marine One are stationed, but on top of that, even the regular helicopters that are leaving Joint Base Andrews are often filled with Washington, D.C. VIPs. This seemed like another kind of testing of the perimeter. How fast does the FBI get to the point of the shooting? Things like that, like they were learning. Let's go to the next one. Another couple of days after the helicopter incident, that a small plane was forced to land by F-16s because they flew over Trump airspace while he was at that golf course, right? They first attempted to contact the airplane. The airplane did not respond to attempts to contact. The F-16s were deployed. The F-16 had to shoot a flare off to get the pilot to respond to him. Now, if two F-16s show up on either side of your little buzz plane like this, do you think you need them to shoot flares before you change the channel to the emergency channel? I mean, is that necessary? Strange, huh? And note the color of the aircraft, black and yellow, predominantly yellow. But just note the color, because black and yellow, it's not usual for an airplane, right? And again, this seemed to be a test. How fast does the civil airspace try to contact us once we violate airspace? How fast do the strike fighters get here? And how fast do they get us landed? How aggressive are they? And then there's one more. Just again, a few days later after that, a drone nearly hits Air Force One. Multiple witnesses say a drone came too close for comfort with Air Force One as it headed toward a touchdown in Washington last night. The specially outfitted Boeing 747-200B was approaching an airport near Washington when several on board saw the object, which most seemed to agree was a drone. Air Force One was on final approach for landing. That's when several passengers on board noticed a drone off the plane's right side. The object sighted was yellow and black and shaped like a cross, according to a Bloomberg news agency. Isn't that strange? That the airplane who tested the airspace a few days before this was yellow and black, and then this drone that's almost hitting Air Force One while it lands is yellow and black. How do they not have a technology that prevents RF signals from drones around Air Force One? I don't know. I mean, they definitely have frequency jamming technology, and yet this drone almost whacked right into the side of Air Force One. Again, it didn't hit Air Force One, but it tested a boundary. And I'll tell you what this reminds me of. Sharks do what they call a bump and bite, or shark bump, or nose bump. Basically, they'll circle their prey, and then they'll come in and kind of whack it with a nose and see, what's the response? Is this something that I can eat? Is this something that will fight back? These kinds of things. Then it'll circle around and maybe bump you again. And, then it comes in to eat a meal. It seems like these are all little shark bumps and they're circling. But the thing that bothers me about it, and this is weird, I know, but the thing that bothers me most about it is that the color of the airplane and the color of the drone matched. Both yellow and black and violating Trump airspace. It seems just, I don't know. I've learned over time that when reality shows me these little, what I'll call coincidences or moments of chance or matching facts, it usually is not for no reason. There is quite often a meaning behind it. And guys, I'm jumping in here on the day of my upload. My videos typically take about in between 2 to 3 days to make. Some of them take months, some of them just take a few minutes, but in general they take a couple of days. I've been working on this running theory for about 4 days now and putting the video together for the last 3. Normally, I don't come back in and adjust my videos unless something that I feel like is significant and pertaining to my subject matter will I pull the video and cut it and throw something else in there. This is one of those situations. Previously in the video, we covered the aircraft testing the airspace above where Trump was. We covered the drone almost hitting Air Force One. Now, in Florida, they had to remove a missile, a live missile that was discovered in a cargo plane, okay? MacDill EOD remove French air-to-air missile from Florida airport. It's not every day that the bomb disposal team from MacDill Air Force Base gets called out to deal with a French air-to-air missile, but last Friday was no ordinary day. Members of the 6th EOD team were called out to Lakeland Linder International Airport Friday after it was shut down in the wake of the discovery of the missile, which had been delivered to Draken International. Based at the airport, Draken has a fleet of about 150 former military aircraft it contracts out to help train current military pilots. Okay, so this company, Draken International, purchases and supplies the opposition forces that fly against our pilots that are training. They call them Op 4 in the military. I don't know what the Air Force calls it. Call it Op 4 in the Army. I want that to sink in now. A company that has its own fleet of military aircraft on U.S. soil had a live missile shipped to it, supposedly by accident. We'll let them say it was by accident, but think about it in the greater context of what I've said in the video so far. You know, this accidental missile that got shipped to this airport, how many airports didn't catch it? How many of these Op 4 supplying companies are there? Because, you know, after 9/11 happened, we all wondered to ourselves, how could these guys be training on airplanes like that and nobody say anything down in Florida? Let me just say it like this. If you want to do something in the skies of America, right? You cannot fly from outside of America into America and get an attack done. It's just not going to happen. You have to start from inside our borders, or you have to use commercial aircraft that the FAA thinks it's supposed to be there. So imagine you wanted to do something in our skies. You would have to take off from inside the borders. Go map of the earth low and fast until you get where you want to go and do what you want to do. The thing that's disturbing to me about this is it's an air-to-air missile. Now, this company runs outdated aircraft, supposedly, older French aircraft. This is an older French air-to-air missile. You would even call them maybe even outdated, right? And you wouldn't think that that would be very useful against anything other than typical commercial aircraft at this point. But they flew that drone very, very close to Air Force One. And that has really been bothering me for a couple of days now. I just have a hard time thinking that Air Force One could be subject to an old French air-to-air missile. I hope that that isn't possible, but I don't know. Our EOD team went out and secured the missile, Air Force First Lieutenant Brandon Hanner, a spokesman for the 6th Air Refueling Wing, told Military Times. It was live, but unarmed. That is akin to a bomb that is capable of going off, but it hasn't had the timer turned on. Check. Hanner said that he was told the missile was like having a gun with a bullet in the chamber, but on safety. Someone would have to arm the missile to fire it. Draken officials tell Military Times that, quote, in the process of evaluating shipments to Draken International's Lakeland facility, its team discovered an object with questionable markings indicated it may be explosive. Adhering to the explosive safety rule of exposing the minimum amount of people for the minimum amount of time to a potential explosive hazard, we made the decision to evacuate the facility, inform our surrounding tenants, and contact the appropriate authorities as soon as possible, Draken officials said in a statement. Those authorities responded quickly, rapidly, assessed the situation, and followed their proven protocols. Draken International takes our role in all of the communities we operate in seriously, and we have long-standing operating procedures to ensure we perform safely and reliably every day. Hanner described the missile as a French-made S-530 air-to-air missile. That it was a French air-to-air missile made it kind of unique for our team, said Hanner. It was manufactured outside the United States, but we used the same protocol to respond and secure it. After receiving a call from officials in Lakeland, the 6th Air Refueling Wing's Logistics Readiness Squadron sent a flatbed truck to pick up the missile, which was in a container. The MacDill crews, working with the ATF and the Lakeland Fire Department, secured the missile and brought it back to base, where it is currently being stored until it can be disposed. That is likely not going to happen here, Hanner said. It is too big for our range. It will have to be taken off-site to be disposed of. Though the airport was shut down and businesses evacuated, the timing worked out for Draken's next-door neighbor, the NOAA Aircraft Operations Center. Home to the 2 WP-3 Orion Hurricane Hunters named Kermit and Miss Piggy, the G-4 jet named Gonzo, the NOAA AOC had already completed its missions for the week by the time the alert went out. The airport director texted me and explained the situation. Carl Newman, deputy director of the NOAA AOC, told Military Times. It was roughly 2:25 p.m. and we only had a few employees left at the center. Having completed our objectives for the week, we simply cleared out and did not affect our work. Luckily, we were all very lucky, for which I am thankful. So think about this. I was talking about all those other situations in the context of a shark bump, a nose bump. If you want, how do I put this? Do you guys remember that when Q talked about the missile being shot at Air Force One and the Hawaii missile alarm? Do you remember when the entirety of the Atlanta airport power went out, and whenever they got pictures of the boxes, it was clear that they had been sabotaged? What if you wanted to clear out an entire airport or an important thing next to something? Okay, how am I trying to say this? So in this case, NOAA was right next to Draken. But what if there's something else at an airport that you want disabled? You could ship even an unexploded ordnance like this and put markings on it that make it look explosive and evacuate key components of that entire airport for a certain amount of time. They just did that with this. Draken discovers the thing that could possibly be explosive. Everywhere is evacuated, including NOAA. Well, what if the people who did this were trying to watch what NOAA did, how they responded? What if there's an FAA or air traffic control place at another airport that they want evacuated, and they want to see if they ship this like this, will it evacuate the place next to it? Will it evacuate the entire airport? How long will it take them to remove the ordnance? In this way, even a non-exploded ordnance could be very useful to shutting down key components of our missile defense system, key components of our air traffic controlling system, key components of our ports. You could have them completely emptied out by shipping something like this. And if somebody did this intentionally, they know now it works. Not only did it evacuate Draken, it evacuated NOAA. Now, NOAA just runs hurricane planes, but there are other places next to other ports that are far more important to military strategy. So my point is, this doesn't have to be a missile that's intended to be snuck through Draken and attached to an aircraft that has the right to fly around in U.S. airspace because it's been declared OP4, that it could technically shoot a live missile at. It could be a truly dummy missile. But the markings on it that said it was explosive caused this specific reaction. My point is what if these people are checking the perimeter? They're doing dry runs on something that they're putting together, and I'm starting to see the aircraft that flew over Jersey, that it did not respond to civil air authorities. I don't know a whole lot about this situation, but also the F-16s would have been within eyesight of these people. They would also dip their wings back and forth. None of this worked. They had to shoot flares off in front of them to get them to respond and allow them to be escorted. And my whole point is, what if they're testing the response to an airplane violating Trump's airspace and not answering civil authorities? Because if they were, they just measured that time period and they now know how much time they have to pull off the aircraft that are protecting Trump's airspace. They're willing to dip their wings and shoot flares and, do everything that they can not to shoot the aircraft down so that they can escort it down. What if your plan is to take advantage of that time period? So they have now tested how long the jets that are protecting Trump's airspace will actually deal with a civilian aircraft that everybody thinks is just a dum-dum and flying into the airspace. They're also seeing how long they'll be gone. Okay, add to that, they now know drones can get within a few feet of Air Force One. They did that test. The helicopter that was shot at is part of the presidential fleet. Yeah, I guess it's part of the presidential fleet. Like I had said earlier, it flies VIPs and such. But what if they were testing something different? What if they just needed to test, does this work in a Maryland suburb? They know they can fire off that firearm at a helicopter 1,000 feet off the ground outside of Maryland. They know they can fly a drone right up to the Air Force One. They now know how long the F-16s guarding Trump's airspace will deal with an airplane that's just really trying to distract them and pull them away from an actual attack. And they know that they can send a fake unexploded ordnance to an airport and get essentially the whole airport shut down for a certain amount of time. Are you guys picking up what I'm putting down, or am I just sounding crazy? I don't know. I'll put all these links in the description, you guys, but I just wanted to cut in here before I go over tip, because I feel like this is something it's all very vague to me. I'm not able to get the pieces together, but I know it's important. And I'll say it again because this is the next day now, but it still bothers me that the drone and the airplane were both yellow and black. I don't know why that bugs me. Anyways, I'm going to let you guys get on with the rest of this episode. I will have all these links in the description. This is crazy. All right, guys. And I got to be honest, I'm a little bit worried about the president because if anybody who covers him knows him, how he speaks. As a matter of fact, I've learned over time that a lot of people who just cannot give him a chance, it's because they're not very good at reading him. They're always taking him literally. And Trump is... Well, he's always serious, but he's very rarely literal. I mean, even if you look at things like Obama tapped my phones, or Jeffrey likes him a little young. He's dropped 1 million, and they're huge bombshells, but he kind of says them in a way where at the time people just kind of laugh it off, they don't take it serious, or they just don't catch what he's saying. When he's talking about these middlemen and that he might not be around, it puts a chill in my spine, because regardless of anybody's politics, I don't ever want that to happen to my president while I'm alive. And I'm rambling at this point, but it has been a busy couple of weeks for the Secret Service, and it did all start happening after he made that speech at Whirlpool. So I think it might be something for us to keep our eyes on. Guys, I don't think that the timing of all of this is to be ignored either. I don't know if you guys have heard about TIPS, or the Transition Integrity Project, TIP. This is the deep state gotten together and literally wargamed the next few months with Trump. And then they wargamed 4 different scenarios that could possibly happen during the election. And you guys, this isn't a joke. By the end of one of the war games, John Podesta, who was playing the role of Joe Biden, literally the game ended with him saying, well, the military's going to have to make a decision. Refusing to concede and saying that, oh, well, we'll just have to wait and see what the military does. Everything you've seen in the past few weeks comes straight out of this document. They're countering Trump's narrative about mass mail-in ballots because they've already wargamed it. And they say that this was done, this is funny, they say it was bipartisan. And I guess in the two-party dichotomy, the fake two-party thing that goes on here, I guess you could consider it bipartisan. But in reality, it was a who's who of Trump derangement syndrome on both sides of the aisle. And they're making the worst assumptions. They're assuming Trump is not going to concede if he loses. That's really funny because that's what Clinton said he was going to do, and then he won and she ran a coup. They're saying that he's going to try and suppress votes, and let's just go over a couple of things real quick. Among the findings we highlight in the report, the concept of election night is no longer accurate and indeed dangerous. They want Americans to get used to the idea that they're going to be counting ballots for months after the election. A determined campaign has opportunity to contest the election into January 2021, and the administrative transition process itself may be highly disrupted. This is from the people who just got done causing probably the most disrupted transition of power in the history of our country. They say we need to plan for a contested election. Focus on readiness in the states providing political support for a complete and accurate count. Address the two biggest threats head on: lies about voter fraud and escalating violence. Anticipate rocky administrative transition. The thing that is so bizarre to me is that they're both sides, because they're claiming the Republican side is Republican, but both sides are just blanketly assuming Trump is going to lose. And then he's going to contest his loss. I don't understand how people can make the same exact mistakes in a row 4 years later. I mean, if you're a Bernie guy, you fell for the Bernie grift twice. The DNC is going to screwed you over twice with superdelegates, and they pushed away all of the populist candidates on the Democrat side and implanted an old, obnoxious person. Hillary Clinton is just as unelectable as Joe Biden. It's so funny. I talk about it all the time. I don't mean to repeat myself. It's this report, this tip report, it is the hugest example of hypocrisy I've seen in a very long time. If President Trump's future actions violate long-standing legal and ethical norms relating to presidential elections, there is also a risk that they will push other actors, including potentially some in the Democratic Party, to similarly engage in practices that depart from traditional rule of law norms out of perceived self-defense. Top-line findings. Campaign decisions about whether to contest the election are likely to be political calculations rather than calculations based on legal rules alone. Interesting. Trump team often had the advantage because they could rely on Fox News, a significant and committed base, and loyalties from law enforcement agencies. Team Biden often had the majority of the public on its side, and the ability to mobilize resentment about the structural disenfranchisement in the way we conduct presidential elections. 2. A close and contested election may be resolved through the exercise of power, not through the courts. Biden's strategic assets include Democratic governors and secretaries of state in swing states, notably North Carolina, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, a broadly shared sense in the Democrat Party that current voting systems, as well as the Electoral College, are structurally anti-democratic, and a widespread and deeply held desire on the part of Democrats nationwide to move on from the chaos of the Trump administration. In all the scenarios examined in TIP's exercises, even as votes were still being counted, Team Biden moved quickly to try to project an ability to govern by announcing cabinet nominees and agenda for the first 100 days and bipartisan support for its administration. During the exercise, Team Biden and Democrat elected officials took the following steps. They organized 1,000, quote, influencers to denounce efforts to steal the election. Organizing all living presidents to stand with Biden and denounce Trump administration efforts to subvert the Democrat process. Recruiting moderate Republican governors like Baker and Hogan to form Election Protection Coalition. Working with local Democratic elected officials to call on the Adjutant General of the National Guard, along with representatives from the technology sector, to monitor vote counting. You got that? So the party that couldn't run the Iowa caucus, you remember that app? There is not an app for the Iowa caucus. There's not an app for that. They tried that. It did not go well. As an incumbent unbounded by norms, President Trump has a huge advantage. Right, he's not bound by norms. A show of numbers in the streets and actions in the streets may be decisive factors in determining what the public perceives as just and legitimate outcome. This is a playbook, you guys. Just like they got together and did Event 201, and they wargamed out this whole CV thing. You can go back and you can watch the recordings of Event 201, and you can see what they did. This tip thing, this is the same thing. They're wargaming the next few months out, and you can read this like it's a fortune teller. Some of this is already happening. Of course, obviously, they've already organized influencers. Obviously, they've already pushed rioting and what they call in this peaceful protest. They still use that. Obviously, they've already done that. But other things that they've done, they're countering Trump's push on mass mail-in voting. And you see it by this combined effort to tell the American people, literally, Trump is having mailboxes removed from neighborhoods. This huge fight over the post office comes from this war game. And the things that they're going to do against Trump in the coming months, they're in here too. During TIP's exercises, Team Biden almost always called for and relied on mass protests to demonstrate the public's commitment to a legitimate outcome, with the objective of hardening the resolve of Democratic elected officials to fight and take action and to dramatize the stakes. Well, that's what they've been doing already. In addition, the exercises suggest that there is a significant possibility of simultaneous street mobilizations by both Trump and Biden supporters, in which case the possibility for violence will increase significantly, and the actions of law enforcement will become critical. Of note here, TIP's scenario exercise suggests that President Trump and his more fervent supporters have every incentive to try to turn peaceful pro-Biden or anti-Trump protests violent in order to generate evidence that a Democratic victory is tantamount to mob rule. In the recent past, President Trump has on numerous occasions called on the Second Amendment people to defend their rights and has called on his supporters to liberate states with restrictive CV-related rules. Trump can rely on surrogates to embed operatives inside protests. People believe this. encourage violent action, and he can mobilize a range of law enforcement actors, including the National Guard troops, whether federalized or under the control of GOP governors, who might, without proper training or if led by politicized actors, escalate matters. In some scenarios examined by TIP, Team Trump succeeded in invoking the Insurrection Act and sending active duty military troops into U.S. cities to restore order, protect voting places, or confiscate fraudulent ballots. Trump is likely to prioritize his personal interests in the transition period. This is one of the most interesting ones to me. They are so convinced he's going to lose. The only thing that they're focusing on is that Trump's going to try to grab a bunch of money on his way out the door. Listen to this. TIP constructed scenarios intended to illuminate issues in the transition period, but during the exercise, the active teams spent most of their time contesting the election results. As a result, the insights on the formal transition are somewhat limited. Nevertheless, a few themes emerged. Take the money and run. Participants in the scenario exercises universally believed that the self-preservation for President Trump and his family will be Trump's first and possibly only priority if he is forced to concede electoral defeat. You guys, let me read that to you again, okay? Because they're calling this a bipartisan group. Participants in the scenario exercises universally, so everyone there, believed that self-preservation for President Trump and his family will be Trump's first and possibly only priority. The only president to donate his salary to charity every month, his only worry will be self-preservation. I find it so strange because even if I was seeing Democrat leaders stand up for the Democrat people and take licks from all the politicians around the country, I would still look at that politician and be like, wow, he really is working for his people. How can they not see that Trump is standing in front of half the country, taking licks? Because the people he's taking licks for, they know it. You talk to people and they say things like they hate Trump, but they really hate us, and Trump's just in the way. This is the narrative on that side of the coin, whether you believe it or not. These people are completely blind to it. They think the man is just going to be worried about his own personal interests if he loses the election. They don't see it. I don't know if I could get them to see it. Before he leaves office, he might maximize the flow of federal money into Trump businesses. Moves played: direct CV-19 relief package to Trump hotels, relocate to Mar-a-Lago for final months of his presidency, negotiate business deals with foreign countries, and purge documents that might incriminate foreign governments and business partners. President Trump could also launch his next business venture from the White House. Speculations include MAGA TV, pardon everyone. In almost every TIP scenario, okay, so that tells you something. In almost every scenario, Team Trump executed or prepared for the pardons of relatives, campaign associates, and himself. Players took different approaches in each of the scenarios. In one scenario, Trump resigned on January 19th, 2021, trusting that Pence would sign the pardons. In another scenario, Trump executed his own pardon. In the debrief, participants noted that the pardons could be challenged only after he leaves office and someone files charges. Even with an expansive understanding of pardon powers, Trump can't absolve himself of state crimes. He could, however, impugn the character of state officials, including, for instance, the character of New York State Attorney Letitia James, who wants to shut down the NRA. Ma'am, you mean you want to sue the NRA? No, I want to shut them down. Well, why? When I started looking, the corruption is just too wide. Like, how did you get on TV? If you didn't watch that press conference, don't. What a moron. Anyways, wag the dog. Spark a foreign adventure. When I read this one, it struck me that the participants were all politicians in America over the past 50 years. So of course they came up with this option. This is what they would do if they were in the incumbency. Destroy evidence. Disrupt the transition process. So the recommendations to avoid a crisis focus on readiness in states, providing political support for a complete and accurate count. Get it right here to avoid a crisis. Name the elephant in the room. President Trump is not running a normal re-election campaign. There's a difference between running for re-election and attempting to stay in power through any means possible. A norm-disregarding incumbent has assets that can influence the outcome. If President Trump's actions and statements over the course of his presidency raise serious concerns about whether he will observe the norms of our electoral system, President Trump's actions and statements over the course of his presidency raise serious concerns about whether he will observe the norms of our electoral system. Everyone, particularly the media and nonpartisan actors, should avoid both-sidism, the instinct to appear neutral, by positing false equivalencies between major and minor norm breaches or illegalities. And here they've literally coined the term for the this or that I've been explaining. They call it both-sidism. Well, heaven forbid somebody try to see things from both sides. But see, here's what I was trying to explain about the this or that. There is no both sides. If you believe other than what the norms for society put through, then everything that you say, and trust and believe when they say positing false equivalencies between major and minor norm breaches or illegalities, what they mean by that is they don't want the media comparing what Trump did to what Biden did, because what the assertion here is that the things that Biden does in the Democrat Party and the establishment, they're not nearly as bad as what Trump does, and so you don't want to compare the two. Or as Biden would say, come on, guy. You can only be this or that, guys. Remember that. You can only be this or that. Of particular concern are the president's ability to federalize the National Guard, to deploy the military domestically, to launch investigations into opponents, and to freeze their assets, and even to control communication in the name of national security. That line is the biggest pile of horse hockey I've ever read in my life. This line, written by the likes of Mitt Romney and John Podesta, you know why they're scared of these things? They're concerned because over the past 50 years, they're the ones who gave the executive these powers. The president shouldn't be able to deploy the actual military on U.S. soil, but he can. Why? Not because of Trump. So they are concerned about the powers they gave the president when the president was in the club. Now he's not, and they're like, ooh, these things we use to our advantage, they're now to our disadvantage. I mean, they say to launch investigations into opponents. That's literally what they did. Freeze their assets, literally what they did. And control communication in the name of national security. It's literally what they did to Trump. You got to address the two biggest threats head on: lies about voter fraud and escalating violence. There is no voter fraud. There is no escalating violence. Remember, this is a bipartisan group, guys. And I'm going to give this to you guys in the description, and I'm going to let you guys go through it. I really wanted to cover it in super detail, but it is just kind of long in the tooth, and I don't want to just be reading into the microphone. What I can tell you is they game out 4 different scenarios, and in all of them, everything goes to shit. In none of their scenarios did they game out a peaceful transition. So what does that tell you? The 75 plus people that were packed together in this room to do this war game, and they use dice, and it's a war game. They're LARPing. So these guys from, quote, big quote, bunny ears up here, both sides of the aisle, they get together, they spend all this time, they're these smart minds, and they don't see a single way a peaceful transition of power happens. What does that tell you? I'll just put my personal opinion out there. I think that there's going to be one of two situations. Either gigantic electoral college landslide for Trump or voter fraud. And I covered the elections in Korea, you guys. I made a video a while back on that. I would look at that video to see what are the possibilities for election fraud in our country now, because all the problems that South Korea had earlier this year, I feel like are the same problems that are going to go down in the U.S. Again, I think it was a dry run. When these people get together and do these war games, we got to start paying attention, because what they're doing right now is right here in this report. Everything they say about Trump and why they say it about Trump is right here in this report. The thing that is like truly disturbing about this is the assumptions that they're making about Trump with no basis in reality. They're making these heinous assumptions about Trump. If it turns out to be an electoral college landslide win for Trump, they still don't see a peaceful transition happening. They're planning for both sides to be out in the streets in the time period from the election night until the transition. That's what they're planning on. And that's just code for that's what they're going to make happen. One of these scenarios, John Podesta as Biden even was backing Gavin Newsom and trying to get CalExit to happen. They're pushing for Washington, D.C. to be a state so they could get 2 electoral college votes there. They're doing really insidious stuff. They're trying to abolish the electoral college. People, I feel like maybe I should do an episode just on the electoral college. I don't understand how people can't comprehend why we have to have the electoral college. Why does any small state want to stay in a union they have no say in? I don't understand how people don't get this. The reason why there's an electoral college is not, quote, because we vote based off land and not people. No, that's not what's happening. It's not voting for land. It's not. If you want to do popular vote, that's great. You can do CalExit. California can become a country, and you can do popular vote. Understand, we do popular vote in each state. But in order to get all 50 states to agree to become the United States, they had to figure out a way to give the smaller states a voice. This is why it's called a constitutional republic and not a straight-out democracy. A democracy, it subjects everyone to the rule of the masses. The 49% under the thumb of the 51%. It will always and forever be that way. In this country, we think that minority populations should have a voice, and it should stay that way. Otherwise, if you abolish the Electoral College, you're going to see a balkanization of the United States. And this move that I covered a month and a half ago of them trying to abolish the Electoral College, it's all states that Biden's going to win anyways. But it is something we need to keep an eye on there too. Because a lot of the wargaming that went on the Democratic side on this tip thing involved discrediting the Electoral College. What can we do other than read this and understand what their moves are and be ready for this as citizens, as regular people? Because I'm sorry, but the majority of people are not behind these guys and gals. Every single person who got in that room and wargamed this out for tip is hated, roundly hated by the United States of America, by the people here. Like him or not, one of the things that Trump has done is wake up a lot of people to how crappy our politicians are. You know, you could say whatever you want to say about Trump, but there's one thing you can't say about him, and that is he's been in our political system for 40 years, ruining our country. Can't say that about Trump. Who can you say that about? I don't know. Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Mitch McConnell. They all need to go. I'm not covering this in enough detail, guys. I really suggest that you just go to the comment section below and just read it, because you're going to get some mind-blowing insights by reading this. And I'll also put in the description, or put in the comment section, a link to a couple of news stories about this, because you can learn as much from the coverage of the report by the media. The way the media is acting with this report is also part of their war game. They've parsed this out. And the sooner everybody realizes that everything we're seeing on television, everything we're seeing on social media, everything that's going on with our politicians, it's all geared towards you, to putting you in fear so that you stay home, so that you don't go outside and defend your property, your life, your fellow citizens. We've all seen what happened in Portland 2 nights ago. They almost beat that poor kid to death. There is violence going on everywhere, and it is only going to get worse. And everything that's happened up until this point right here is to convince the silent majority to remain silent. Stay at home, watch your TV, mail your ballot in. Don't talk to your family. Don't talk to your friends. And in the meantime, anybody who wants to go outside and riot, you're welcome to. I have been saying for about a month now, God, I hope there's no clapback. Man, they're really pining for a response. They really want a response. Man, I hope that there's no response, because up till now, the silent majority has not responded to Antifa. They have not responded to BLM. They're still trying to pretend like they're going to go away. And as people in America start to wake up and realize they're not going away, the politicians are not going away, the system that the anarchists are trying to tear down, it is, in fact, broken, and that our country is either going to fall into the hands of patriotic Americans or psychopaths. Pretending like this isn't happening, not going to be an option for much longer. And God help us all if and when the response happens. As for myself, I pray for peace every day. All right, guys. Like, share, sub the channel. Later.